Okay, here's my audience for today's speech.
Greetings.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to my speech, my informative speech for my communications class. Um, Today, I will be talking about the Kansas City Chiefs and their very rich history. So the Chiefs began. They've existed since 1960 in the American Football League, which preceded the NFL, or the National Football League, which is the organization the Chiefs are a part of today. They were actually one of the most successful teams in the American Football League, gathering 87 wins in total in their short period of time in that league, and before their move to the NFL. Unfortunately, they haven't exactly repeated their initial success with the Super Bowl win, but we are hoping to do that very soon. As KU students, I think we are all close enough to Kansas City to we have an obligation to be a little bit informed about our city and the sports involved in our city, and not just what they do on the field, but what they do off the field as well. The Chiefs have a very rich history, started by Lamar Hunt as the Dallas Texans in the American Football League. With their move to Kansas City in 1963, we have over 50 years of history to learn about in about 5 minutes, so I'll parse it down as much as I can. And as a Chiefs, I've been a Chiefs fan for my whole life and have always been interested in history, so I feel like I have enough knowledge and information that I can share with you all and have a little bit of reliability with that information. So I'll start with the 1960s, kind of skip over the 70s and 80s because those were a darker time in our history, and talk about current day, and then go on to what the Chiefs do off the field, which is just as important as what they do on the field. So in the 1960s, the Chiefs started in the American Football League, like I mentioned, as the Dallas Texans in 1959. Lamar Hunt was the founder of that team and remained the founder until his death in the 2010s. And Clark Hunt, his son, is currently the owner of the Chiefs. The original plan was a competitor to the Dallas Cowboys, one of the biggest and still one of the biggest football teams in the NFL today. They were 1962 AFL champions and moved to Kansas City in 1963 and became the Kansas City Chiefs, which we know today. They won the 1966 AFL championship, which meant they got to play in the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, that was against the Green Bay Packers, led by Vince Lombardi. So we lost the inaugural Super Bowl, but we made it 3 years later, and played in Super Bowl IV and won that game against the Minnesota Vikings, and as still is our only Super Bowl win to date. Unfortunately, the Chiefs kind of fell off after that Super Bowl win, all throughout the 70s and 80s, and could not find much playoff success until the 90s. So I will jump to the 90s. So throughout the 70s and 80s, it was fairly obvious that the Chiefs needed a culture change. So we hired a young and up-and-coming coach named Marty Schottenheimer, who instilled more tough-nosed and hard-nosed offense and defense for the Chiefs. He took over in 1989 and kind of set the tone by drafting Derek Thomas, who was one of the toughest college football players to come out at the time. And that set the tone for the next, it's about 10 years of Chiefs football where we played tough, more of a ground and pound type football, not that we know today with Patrick Mahomes. We also traded for Joe Montana, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game in 1993, and with that brought great expectations that were never quite lived up to. And in 1989, the Chiefs replaced Marty Schottenheimer with Dick Vermeil, who kind of did a 180. With Trent Green and Priest Holmes, we did more of a high-flying, high-powered offense. Again, brought great expectations, and again, we couldn't quite live up to the playoff expectations that we had. And again, he was replaced by Herm Edwards. And in 2013, the Chiefs brought in Andy Reid, who is our current coach. And he brought some postseason success that we hadn't seen in 50 years to the Chiefs, and we won our first playoff game under Andy Reid in 2015 over the Houston Texans. And in 2017, we drafted maybe our savior, Patrick Mahomes, who hopefully will bring Super Bowl to Kansas City in the near future. But the Chiefs are more than just a football team. They're very active in the community projects, and just kind of being a presence around Kansas City, letting us know that they care about their society and our culture just as much as they care about their success on the field. The Chiefs have always been big advocates for the youth in Kansas City. They're very involved in Children's Place Kansas City, and in the last 3 years, they have raised $2.3 million for that organization, according to the community report put out by the Kansas City Chiefs. Children's Place Kansas City spreads their money out to a lot of different resources. Kids growing up without parents, or kids who don't have as great resources as other kids. So the Chiefs do a lot with that organization, and they're also very involved with Play 60 Kansas City, which is a little bit more of a specific charity, and they want to get kids out exercising and having fun. And the Chiefs have kids have logged through the Chiefs 9 million minutes of exercise in the 2017-2018 season. Again, that was from the community report. And the Chiefs are very well known for their Red Coders, which is a group of business men and women, strictly volunteers, who pair up with the Chiefs to raise money and give time to their community. And the Red Coders have logged 5,000 hours in that same 2017-2018 season. They have no obligation to the Chiefs or to the community. They just feel it's a good partnership to better our society and our city. So I talked about the 1960s and how the Chiefs started as the Dallas Texans and moved to Kansas City in 1963 and had early success, a couple decades of not living up to expectations, especially in the playoffs. And under our current coach, Andy Reid, and quarterback Patrick Mahomes, hopefully we can change the tide and have a little bit more postseason success, not just regular season. And finally, the Chiefs are not just a football team. They do a lot for our community and our city, and we're very proud to have them as our football team that represents our city. So thank you for listening to my informative speech. I hope you learned a little bit about the Kansas City Chiefs. Thank you.